Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Knockout Podcast, episode 56. UFC 261 is in the books, and crikey, some event we've just had, as we were saying before we came off air, before we came on air rather, as a 5-fight main card. I'm not sure you're going to see more sort of drama and action in such little time than what we saw, but we're gonna attempt to try and piece together some coherent thoughts on this, but looking back at it now is just bringing back so many flashbacks of what was just absolute carnage. I mean, first off, I'll go with you, Jack, because you were watching it live. First thing I want to say is we both thought that crowds weren't going to be here. I had in my head it was 264 for Poirier McGregor 3. What was your thoughts on that? Because I thought it was weird.
Not only it was weird, just like the general. They were such a terrible crowd as well. Just like, I don't know, just like the way everyone came out, when everyone came out, the boos for Usman, the boos for Jan. Like, I was like, can we go back to crowdless events, please? To be honest, but no, I wasn't a big fan of it. But yeah, I did think that the next pay-per-view was the first one, but whatever. What are you going to do? They were fairly awful. So, but there we go.
It was just the general noise. I mean, I think when you watch football, especially like now, they haven't had the crowds. They sort of pipe in some noise, but you've gone from sort of like UFC where it's nothing, where the sort of the no crowd element has actually not worked their advantage, obviously, but it has provided quite an interesting viewing experience because you can hear everything, you can hear the corners. There is sort of an eerie silence to it, which I think is quite cool. But then just hearing like all the noise, like every strike was done, I was like, God, is this really what it was like? It was so weird because it has been virtually 11 months really, but I mean they had a couple of thousand in for Poirier and McGregor, but I mean that was hardly much compared to how many did they have in here? 15,000. I mean, for better or for worse, but we won't get into that. But we'll stick to the fights rather than slightly xenophobic Floridian crowds, and we may as well start with the main event. Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal knocked out for the first time in his professional career, second round. I mean, we said going into this, we thought Usman was the kind of guy just to, stick to the path of least resistance, stick to what he knew would get him the win easiest, and that was going to be the wrestling. Masvidal even recognized that in the post-fight presser that he was expecting more wrestling, but Usman just kept it on the feet and showed just how much he is continuing to evolve as an elite striker, really.
Yeah, like genuinely, like a very Whitman has done wonders with him. Like you saw it a few times in the fight. He did get a bit wild at times.
Yeah, a couple of those left hooks were very sort of.
Yeah, wild. Like he would go in for kind of like swinging flurries, like what kind of wild left hooks, bit of a wild overhand. But then when it came to the knockout, it was set up beautifully first with first off, like start of the fight, started like from a narrative perspective, like how did he set this up? Like Usman, it has been said, like, and he has really developed his jab like over the last few fights, the time particularly he's been working with Whitman. That's become a thing that has become one of his best weapons, honestly. Not the best. I still think his right hand is a better weapon for him, as we saw. But like he really gets to work with the jab. And also another thing for his like particular style that he does very well is he's very kind of level changey with his striking. He will really jab to the body and really make like sort of an exaggerated level change when he's striking to cut, like, because that works well to feint takedowns. So I think he does that very well. And then he kind of like, he set up the knockout after establishing the jab or the threat of the jab by kind of feinting a kind of like more of like a left hook, but kind of essentially a jab, drew out kind of like the parry and then the kind of check hook counter from Masvidal. And then Usman just slipped in a direct down the pipe right hand that mechanically was absolutely gorgeous. Like a lot of credit goes to Whitman there for how he's kind of worked on the specific punching form of Usman, because it was a fantastic right hand and like put Masvidal basically straight to sleep.
Oh yeah, I mean he was like Usman, like he put so much into that. He almost fell over, and he was sort of like stopped falling over because he landed on sort of Masvidal's shoulder as Masvidal collapsed. It was brutal. It was out straight from the punch. But
yeah, that's a kind of another good thing about it's that good punching mechanics. Having good punching mechanics like has its own built-in head movement. So one thing like Usman did really follow it through there, but like if you're throwing a right hand like that, you move your head out of the way without having to really think about it. It's just something that happens if you've got kind of like good punching mechanics. So that's another nice thing. That it's built-in head movement, which is cool. But yeah, I thought Usman just put on overall a fantastic performance. Like Masvidal came out fairly lively as he did in the first fight again, but then got a bit carried away, which allowed kind of Usman to take him down and pressure him against the fence. Kind of a bit of the kind of a repeat of like what we thought would be a more classic Usman game plan. And that was after Masvidal tried a flying knee, which I don't think was best advised, but there we go. So yeah, I thought Usman looked fantastic, and yeah, honestly, is probably in for a very good shout now of being what I would deem the pound for pound number one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a look at it afterwards, and he was second to Jones. Given that Jones, lost his last two fights, it's interesting that he's up there. But of course, that's our agenda, and not necessarily how the UFC scoreboard sit. But yeah, I think definitely the way he dealt with Masvidal in the rematch, the way he dealt with Burns. He beat Masvidal in the area where he was technically, you would say maybe that was where Masvidal would want to keep the fight.
Yeah.
If Masvidal would have said you'd have had 5 minutes on the feet, in the first round and into the second, then he'd have been pretty happy. And you could see he was sort of throwing out those leg kicks, and Usman wasn't really biting on them in the same way that he was biting on them in the first fight in terms of trying to get the takedown from them. And I think clearly there was an established game plan that no, we are gonna keep this up, and we fully believe that we can knock Masvidal out. And boy did he! It was
yeah.
It was some knockout, some performance, and he is from a guy that came in and I think probably unfairly, I say probably definitely unfairly, drew a lot of criticism from the way he won the title. He then defended it against Covington, which was a good fight. Okay, the first Masvidal fight wasn't exactly a barnstormer, but it was another dominant win. And you're now seeing in the the Burns and the Masvidal fight that this guy has got, he can crack, which I think we knew in the Covington fight. But now when you add Trevor Whitman to your camp, which I think we've basically been saying that if any fighter needs to get better, just go work with Trevor Whitman. Like, I can't find a fighter that has gone to him and not come out a better fighter, especially when it comes to the stand up. But a great performance from him. I don't know where he goes from here next. Talk about Covington. Maybe there's a winner of Edwards, Diaz. Maybe Wonderboy Thompson has an outside chance if he beats Gilbert Burns. But I feel like those three are probably the next 3 and 9 for him. But it also depends on how long he wants to go. He made some comments in the week saying that he didn't want to be in there for too long. He is only 33, but he has had problems with his knees, and if he's cleaning out the division, which he's looking pretty close to doing, then you wonder sort of what else there is next for him. But another great performance, and it's just exciting just to see where he goes, because he just seems to be getting better and better each time.
Yeah, he genuinely does, and it's like he looked improved here compared to the Burns fight, even though it was only 2.5 months out basically. So that is very nice that he's able to make those improvements in a fairly short amount of time. But yeah, I think as you said, if he adds Edwards and Wonderboy to kind of like his resume, that really makes him like he's got a very strong resume after that. And then like a Covington rematch maybe as well. Although at this point, I don't really know what Covington has for him. I struggle to see an area where I can see where Covington can kind of like press his own advantages and say that here's reliably what you can do to build a game to beat Usman. I just don't really think that Colby can do that right now. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But Yeah, I'd like him to kind of stick around for a bit longer, obviously. See how good he can get, see where he can go. And yeah, there are still like a few good fights for him there, like especially the Edwards and Wonderboy one. And then a few years there could be new contenders. We don't know.
Chimaev with one more win against a bum, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Although that, yeah,
Well, to be fair, he's fighting. I think he's fighting Neil Magny, or at least supposedly too. So
yeah. So
he's probably someone I'm sure they'll be looking to rush up the rankings if he keeps putting on performances. But who knows? I think he's certainly a good year, or well, a good couple of years off being in that position.
yeah, so it's interesting. I think there are still definitely fights for Usman, but he is, as you said, getting fairly close to having cleaned out the division.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean, yeah, just amazing in one word, really. We'll move down the card to the co-main. Rose Namajunas versus Zhang Weili, or I guess what was Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. 1 minute 18, flush head kick. I mean, I think that there were complaints after the fight from Weili. I'm not sure what those complaints were. She looked pretty out to me. Rose here. We said there might be problems late on in this fight as Zhang sort of came on. Didn't matter. Just sold her beautifully with what Zhang thought was going to be a low kick, and just it wasn't even a question mark kick. It just sort of sprung up, and Weili had absolutely no protection, ate it flush, and well, good night. Really, it was a fantastic shot, and I think Rose is. We don't. I mean, when we talk about sort of power punches in the women's division, obviously Nunes comes to mind, but Namajunas now is building up a cracking resume when it comes to knockouts, or at least knocking down opponents, and probably more of it comes from her sort of technique and timing, but very underrated with her power and her ability to knock opponents down, which is a massive advantage in women's MMA.
Yeah, she does have that, and like the reason I think she can do that is like I don't think she's naturally necessarily the heaviest handed fighter. I think she's good at finding the right openings. It's like the old Connor thing: precision beats power, timing beats speed, whatever. I think she's good at doing that, and then kind of like taking advantage of like the fact that she is heavier hitting than a lot of kind of like her contemporaries, I suppose. But no, I thought it was a very good performance from Rose. Like in the short amount of time it lasted, a very kind of like nice footwork on the outside. Like as we say that she generally like does have, at least for the first 2 and a bit rounds, she's able to kind of really stay on the outside and make best use of her jab. But then as fight goes on, like that footwork can tend to kind of fade a bit, because I think it is quite taxing on her stamina. And then yeah, as you said, kind of like Zhang Weili thought it was a low kick coming. Like you can see she pulled her leg back, and then like her stance was like completely compromised essentially from there. And when the head kick caught her, there was nothing she could do. Her stance was so narrow, she just kind of fell back on herself, and was pretty much out. And then the follow-up hammer fists ensured it. So yeah, there can be no complaints. It was a good stoppage. I imagine she just must have thought, she just didn't remember it essentially.
Yeah.
She was like, wait, what's going on? So yeah, it was, yeah. Another thing that I forgot to mention for Masvidal, although I think it was far worse in the case of Weili, was the fact that they went back to interviewing the fighters after being knocked out.
Yeah.
Especially like for Weili, who doesn't speak the language, was facing a very hostile crowd and had just been knocked out. The decision to interview her was, I thought, a terrible one. I have no idea why they did that. I think that they should have just let that be. But there we go. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It is the weird one. I think probably to do with the crowds. I mean, the other one was Jirí Procházka, which we'll get to, being interviewed standing up when he could barely, stand up.
Yeah.
Anyway. That was bizarre. I mean, get the man a chair for God's sake. But
yeah,
we will get to that. I mean, Valentina versus Jessica Andrade, the next one down on the card for the women's flyweight belt. Shame, because I thought we might see. I thought there was a small chance that we might see Andrade drag an interesting fight out of Shevchenko, or at least a competitive fight. Interesting is rather more subjective, but I mean, 7 takedowns in 8 minutes. Just I was surprised at the the strength advantage in the clinch for Valentina, or though perhaps maybe that was more sort of technique based?
I think it was, definitely. I think there were times you saw that Andrade managed to be honest, like, despite the size advantage for Shevchenko, by the looks of it, I think that I would still say Andrade was the physically stronger. I think Shevchenko is just a much better clinch fighter, which was why she was able to do what she did to her. But like, there were a few times you could see Andrade kind of outmuscle her. But then when it was in like kind of elongated exchanges in the clinch, Shevchenko would get the better because she's just more technically sound there. And Andrade had no answer for the body lock, essentially. If Shevchenko got the body lock, it was a guaranteed takedown. Andrade couldn't do anything about it. But yeah, it is a little disappointing, I think, as you said. I would have liked a little more. I would have expected Andrade to do a little more from the clinch, and then on the feet. I don't know. It's difficult on the feet. She was facing a big range disadvantage, Andrade was, so really kind of trying to work her way in was always going to be difficult. But maybe it was more hopeful than anything that I was expecting Andrade to drag a competitive fight out of her when she, in fact, couldn't.
Yeah, I think there probably is certainly an element of that to it. I was surprised. I think probably looking back on it, I was maybe a bit too, not high, but a bit too confident that she could replicate that sort of like head bobbing movement and sort of getting into range. I think against Caitlin Chookagian, famously, who I bet to beat Jessica Andrade, which will go down as one of my worst bets of all time. In a moment of madness, I thought, Chookagian can manage the range. Obviously, no, she can't. But yeah, I think what we saw here is that if you actually, have much like in the strawweight division, when Andrade has come up against, elite opponents, if you have someone who can manage the distance, keep things moving, pick her off, then she's really not got the sort of technical game planning or sort of technical boxing to get herself into range and to land her best shots. But a shame. I mean, I think Dana White's already said that the Shevchenko-Nunes fight is not one he wants to make unless they both want it. I imagine they'll both just go along sort of stat padding. Well, not. I mean, it's not stat padding because they are fighting the supposed best contenders. But I mean, I can't see. Jessica Andrade was comfortably perceived as Shevchenko's best threat, and she got handily dealt with. I can't see Joanne Calderwood or Lauren Murphy, who are probably two of the contenders that spring to mind as providing anything of a different test to what any of our opponents have provided before. But that's just the state of women's flyweight at the minute, and the relative. The huge gap in quality between the champion and the rest of the chasing pack.
Yeah, those divisions, flyweight in particularly, are not very good, and there really isn't anything for Valentina there. But I think I'd comfortably call it stat padding to a degree. She will just continue to rack up title defenses because there is no one to threaten her, and I don't know. Even then, she might fight Nunes after, like, whoever wins out of her and Nunes. Then where do you go from there?
It's the thing, isn't it?
There's just them two can't just fight each other forever. Yeah. Really. So
it's sort of the European Super League of women's MMA.
Yeah.
Just those two in their own sort of league, just fighting each other sort of once every 6 months.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know what you do really, because the only time that either of those I think will give up the belt is when they retire, to be honest. So yeah, it's just not very compelling,
which is a shame. So, but yeah, that is what it is really, and that is about as good as analysis as you're going to get. I mean, talking about great analysis, I'm not really sure what analysis we can do on this next fight. Uriah Hall, Chris Weidman, 17 seconds, one leg kick, one broken leg, one ended fight. I mean, horrible for Weidman. Obviously, a bizarre circularity in that, famously, Anderson Silva was the one who had his leg broken in much the same maneuver against Chris Weidman in their rematch all those years ago. And now Chris Weidman having the same fate meet him in quite the gory and unpleasant way. I mean, nothing we can do, nothing we can do sort of, expand upon that. You mentioned, that people are beginning to check the leg kick, and whilst I don't think for a second this is what Uriah Hall was thinking when he perfectly checked the kick. This is it does show what can happen if you check a kick correctly.
Yeah,
that is, I don't think people should go out there saying, "Oh, I'm gonna break their leg by checking their kick," but ultimately, it does hurt and it does cause damage if the opponent ends up kicking your shin rather than sort of skin that isn't your shin.
Yeah. You said you don't really know what we can analyze. I think that the only thing really to analyze is the irony of the situation happening to Chris Weidman, which I do like. I don't enjoy this. I think you'd have to be pretty messed up to enjoy that. But to a degree, I do enjoy something of the irony, no matter how kind of awful the general situation is. But then, particularly, as you said, checking the low kicks, particularly the calf kicks, they can be checked. And when you do check them, it's easier for these types of injuries to kind of occur than checking of the kind of thigh kicks, which you kind of have to pick up your leg a little bit more to check. It doesn't generally land in such a bad position on either the kicker's shin or on the checker's kind of knee. But when it's the calf kick and you can just make the quick movement of just turning your leg while it's still planted, it can lead to fairly devastating injuries, as we saw. So it'll be interesting to see if that affects, if these things happen more, if this kind of affects the kind of calf kicking meta that kind of exists right now going forward. Could be if this kind of thing, or not quite this bad, but as you said, even if it's not a break, it can still really hurt. Kind of injuries continue to happen. Maybe the calf kick will fade a bit more out of the current kind of dominance it has.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I think there's definitely an element of that will be interesting to track. I think also, if you're looking at the way Rose fights, I think Weili did miss a couple of her low kicks that she attempted, and that sort of constant bobbing in and out of range, as much as it's physically demanding, and probably would have served to her sort of disadvantage if that fight had gone later. I think that's certainly something that fighters have got to be looking at more in terms of just like, as simple as it sounds, if the leg isn't there when they throw the kick, it's not going to get hit. But it's a freak accident, and one that hopefully we don't see two more of. I mean, obviously for Weidman, it'll be interesting to see if he comes back. He's what? How old is he? What, 34, 36?
36, I think, something. I
mean, you're looking at. Well, I would imagine what earliest would be back end of 2022, and even then that feels optimistic for a 36-year-old to expect a recovery time of that. Hopefully, everything goes all right. I think he's had surgery either this morning or yesterday morning in America. So hopefully he can get his way back to some semblance of at least being able to walk around first, and then if possible back in the octagon. But that'll be some time from now. At least for Uriah Hall, it's a win in the books.
Yeah. And I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think some people, or I did see some people saying, they're not sure how this should count for a win for Hall. Like, should it be a TKO? And I think it definitely should be a TKO. It was as a result from his actions. Yes, it's a defensive action, but absolutely this was as a result of Hall's actions. Weidman was no longer able to continue the fight. It's 100% a TKO and a fair win for Hall. But he was very kind of classy and respectful after the fact. So that's nice to see.
There's no real choice, but as you say, very classy in victory, and he will, I guess, move upwards. I mean, someone like Kelvin Gastelum could be an interesting fight. Jack Hermansson. Oh, actually, I think he's booked against Shabazian, isn't he?
I don't know. Sorry, I was thinking of the Gastelum Hall. I think they did fight once before.
I think it was on Ultimate Fighter.
Ultimate Fighter, but I don't know how they fit because they're now very, very good friends.
Yeah,
I
so
think.
maybe not.
So I don't know if they would fight. To be honest, I think they lived together, or they did at some point. They
Yeah,
used to live together.
yeah, you're
something
right.
like
Yeah,
that.
I think you are right.
So yeah, I don't know. That probably won't happen.
We will see, but there's fun fights out there for him.
Yeah, and up for Weidman. I think he should probably retire. To be honest,
I would agree with that.
It's such a not even career altering, a life altering injury. He'll probably, at least to some degree, feel that or not feel fully secure on that, probably for the rest of his life. And as you said, he's 36. There's no need to come back. To be honest, just stay retired, Chris.
Yeah, and so I don't want to be cynical about it. He comes back much like when Tony Ferguson came back after his knee surgery. Everyone kicked the leg, the knee. Yeah. People will kick that leg because
absolutely,
and that's not mean. That's
that's
using an advantage or something that is your opponent's weakness and trying to get a positive outcome out of it. So yeah. I think, as you say, he's 36. He's won the belt. If he was 25 and this was his sort of first, if this had happened to Jimmy Crute, for example, which we'll discuss, he had his own sort of leg issues, I'd say there's still plenty of time there. But for a guy that's won a belt and was really looking for sort of a last run at maybe getting to a title fight in some sort of scenario, then I don't really think there's much need. But we'll see what he decides to do. But best wishes for him in the meantime. Opening up the main card, we had Anthony Smith, Jimmy Crute, which also ended in slightly bizarre circumstances. But before we get to the finish and everything surrounding that, one thing I do want to bring up is I can't remember whether this has been a staple of Anthony Smith's game, but that jab was, we mentioned Usman and his jab, especially if you look at the Burns fight. But as a one round example of what a good jab can do in MMA, that was about as good as it can get. He was piecing up Jimmy Crute's left eye with that jab. He really couldn't get in until he sort of scrambled the takedowns after his leg went. I thought that aspect, at least from Anthony Smith, was very impressive.
Yeah, he looked kind of much improved in that regard. He was doing so. Crute was kind of really trying to come in and heavily pressure him. Although based on kind of the first, we didn't get to see much of the fight, obviously, but based on kind of the first little bits, I feel that Crute's kind of cage cutting footwork wasn't quite there. It wasn't really kind of where it needed to be. It wasn't the best. And then the kind of lack of feints and variety on Crute's own jab, I think was really why Smith managed to have the success he did have. Smith was essentially counter jabbing with Crute. Smith would try and thump in a really hard, powerful jab every time. Didn't really set it up with feints, no throwaway kind of jabs. So Smith was able to read that every time and just counter jab with him. He had the range advantage and could land essentially from slightly further away, knowing the jab was coming, kind of slip a bit out of the way. And yeah, really did very good work with the jab in that regard, kind of just keeping Crute at bay. So even before the leg kicks started to come, he was really generally getting the better of Crute in the exchanges. So I thought, that was a big improvement from Smith. And I think that's we talk a lot kind of about people needing to jab more, and obviously it's not that simple. Clearly you saw here, Crute was jabbing, but you need to have an educated jab. You need to have variety in your jab, and you need to feint with your jab as well, in order for it to really work for you. Otherwise, this might happen. You'll get counter jabbed, or you'll get cross countered regularly. So yeah, Crute looked like he's a young fighter, so he's still got many improvements to make. So yeah, it's not a write-off for Jimmy Crute, I wouldn't say, but yeah, no. We haven't even got to the end of the fight yet.
Well, I mean,
about post-fight,
we mentioned the end of the fight. It was a right low kick from Anthony Smith, which seems like sort of right sort of side of the knee, behind the knee almost. Not quite the same as O'Malley Vera, but similar enough in terms of I think it wasn't the actual kick itself that caused damage to the ligament. He couldn't use it. I think there was clearly some quite substantial nerve damage that meant his leg essentially just shut down. He managed to dive on some pretty impressive sort of reactive takedowns when he like collapsed to the floor, and managed to hold him down for the end of the first round, then sort of stumbled quite literally back to the corner, got on his stool, and there's nothing you can do at that point. You just have to hope that a minute of massaging it or doing whatever they tried to do was gonna work. He stood up, he sort of fell over again, and I think everyone knows the doctor made the right call. I think Jimmy Crute even said in his post-fight that all he was going to do was, as soon as he stood up, he knew it wasn't back, and all he was going to do was just try and pull guard. Disappointing, because obviously I think it would have been a fun fight for another couple of rounds, but fair play to Anthony Smith. He landed the shot in the right place. Again, much like Uriah Hall, I don't think he was expecting it to have that much of effect. But if you land a good kick in the right place, these things can happen, and fair play to him, because it was a good performance.
Yeah, as you said, I think obviously like it's disappointing for Crute, but there is, I suppose, some encouragement there in terms of the fact that obviously from a gritty level, he was clearly he's very tough. Yeah. There was no quitting Jimmy Crute there. He got up, was really you could see when he stood up from the stool in between rounds, he was really amping a show for the crowd, but really more than anything, I shouldn't trying to amp himself up. He was really definitely banging his fists together, really getting into it, scream. And then as he was walking back, unfortunately to a degree, but also very fortunately, he actually then as he was stepping back, his ankle rolled again, and it was clear he can't carry on. But yeah, so that gritty level, and also the fact that he was able to win the rest of the round after he got his leg kicked that was very very impressive. Maybe you can take a shot at Anthony Smith maybe for that. What is your takedown defense?
Anthony Smith is no slouch on the ground.
Yeah, but Crute was really ragdolling him, to be honest. Got him down, really landed big punches, when he kind of had the kind of backside ride. And then was able to take him down multiple times, kind of Matt return him. And then I think Smith got separation and Crute was able to get another takedown. So no, it was that on that level, it was very kind of impressive from Crute. But clearly, the early stages of the fight, there was clearly quite a lot to work on. So no, I don't as you said, I think it's just a nerve thing. I don't think it's any serious injury. So I don't imagine he will be out for a long time or anything.
No,
it's just one of those things that happens.
Yeah, definitely some positives, and I reckon in a back in a crowd, I think this pay per view probably got quite a lot of buys. I think it will do no, he will not have suffered in that defeat. I think people will get behind him or at least remember him as that crazy nutter who was trying to fight on one leg. Yeah. So I don't think he's come out of this too badly, and showing that as you said, he's a young fighter. There's still stuff to work on. This is really his first foray up into the experienced higher levels of the light heavyweight division, but there's certainly a very good fighter in there still. Elsewhere on the card, I didn't catch too much of it. I note it was a bad night for the Chinese fighters all round. We talked about that towards the end. I don't think any of them picked up a win, which was disappointing. Randy Brown got a good win over Alex Oliveira. I saw Brendan Allen got a good win over Carl Robeson, but I didn't catch too much of them. Was there anything on the prelims or the early prelims that you caught or particularly caught your attention?
No, I haven't really. I didn't really pay much attention to the early prelims kind of going in. There was not much that caught my eye there, and kind of I haven't quite caught up with many of the interesting finishes or performances that might have happened. So no, nothing for me. I see that the flyweight fight got fight of the night, so I might have to check that one out, but I haven't actually seen it yet, so not much.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of action on the 5-fight main card to suffice plenty of talking points. Well, with that also wrapped up, we can move to the card that's happening at the weekend, back in the Apex. I assume with no crowds. I don't know. Dominick Reyes versus Jirí Procházka, main eventing. Dominick Reyes coming off that very, very poor performance against Jan Blachowicz. In what was his first title defense. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Disappointing loss to Blachowicz. Procházka, who made his promotional debut in his last fight against Volkan Oezdemir, finished him off with a quite vicious punch in the start of the second round. I can't say I've seen enough of Procházka to make an informed analysis or form an informed opinion of him. Obviously, he was very unconventional in the Oezdemir fight. A lot of weird looks and sort of turning away slightly from Oezdemir, but clearly carries up heaps of power. For Dominick Reyes, I think the really interesting thing will be him. Obviously, put on that really good performance against John Jones, but then look really. I don't even know what the word is, but really off it.
Kind of
against,
impotent.
Yeah,
maybe
the stuff that we said that made his performance against Jones so good. The leg kicks, the pressure, the 1-2. That was just not there. I don't know why. Maybe it was just Blachowicz being sort of underrated again. I think we saw in the Adesanya fight that he does have a canny ability to sort of slow fighters down and make them gun shy to an element, or to an extent rather. But I think the main question for me is what Dom Reyes do we get? Because if we get a Dom Reyes that lays it on Procházka early, much like he did in the Jones fight, I think this is certainly a winnable fight for him. If we get the gun shy, as you said, sort of impotent fighter we saw against Blachowicz, who sort of allows Procházka to settle in to his rhythm of fighting, it could be concerning for him.
Yeah, it'll be as you said, it'll be interesting to see how Reyes looks. It was a fairly brutal knockout as well. Like, it wasn't. So it'll be interesting to see how he's recovered from that as well. If he's looking kind of still at his best, kind of physically and technically. But yeah, other than that, as you said, Procházka is very strange. Like in the Oezdemir fight, just like a lot of kind of weird, wild head movement, like kind of all over the place. That'll be like Dominick Reyes does like kind of like he's the southpaw kind of body and head kick. He likes that. Dominick Reyes does. So kind of that head movement could really play into that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dominick Reyes is kind of like where he kind of normally or has been. If we see Procházka lean onto a head kick at some point. And then, but also this is a 5-round fight. We saw Reyes tire in the Jones fight. So if Procházka is still kind of like there going late, it'd be interesting to see how Reyes can hold up, how Procházka holds up, to be honest. If he's still got that power late, and if Reyes can then survive or win kind of late. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Not too much to say, as like I don't really know that much about Procházka outside of being just a bit odd. But no, it should be fun in some ways. Procházka is wacky enough that he's at least funny. Even if he's not, even if he could be frustrating, I think he's the type of fighter I'd get quite frustrated at, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. Elsewhere on the card, not huge amounts to talk about. Certainly, looking forward to the event. Cub Swanson, Giga Chikadze co-mains, which I think will be a fun one. Cub Swanson came off that really good performance against Daniel Pineda, a second round knockout, and Chikadze, who has slowly built up a solid resume in the UFC. He's now 5-0 against sort of varying levels of short notice and sort of up and coming like him opponents.
Yeah,
interesting fight.
I think that'll be like could be fight of the night, to be honest. Like an outside chance. It should be very fun. I think Cub Swanson did look good against Pineda, and then Chikedzi's quite an experienced kickboxer, very slick on the feet, and yeah, Cub Swanson's generally a fun fight no matter what. So yeah, I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, Ian Kuzmanova third on the fight card. That's interesting, and that'll be all we'll say. Sean Strickland is the guy that I have a lot of mild interest in, and I'll say mild. Beat Brendan Allen again, another one of my bet busters back in the day. Beat Brendan Allen, but looked absolutely massive at middleweight, absolutely ginormous. It was a catchweight bout at 195, and he looked massive, and that was only his second fight up at welterweight, up at middleweight. I mean, I don't know generally how the bloke got down to welterweight. He has lost to Usman in the past, but he looked fun. He fights Christoph Jotko, who I think fought Eric Anders last in a particularly uninspiring fight. I think I've mainly got this for Sean Strickland just to sort of see how he looks, but could be interesting. Dvalishvili, Cody Stamann is another interesting one. Cody Stamann finally returning back down to bantamweight. He's had a sort of a few fights up at featherweight on sort of short notice. He comes in against Dvalishvili, who is a sort of rising star, if you like, I guess. A sort of, he's slowly building up after his couple of losses in his first two fights. Good wins against Casey Kenny and John Dodson in recent memory. That I think that's another one, much like Cub Swanson, Chikadze, which could be a fun one.
Yeah, and then also kind of not so much for the fights necessarily, because I don't know much about the opposition. But on the undercard, you have Gabriel Benitez, who's always a fun fight. Like lots of nice kind of like knees and uppercuts and cool stuff from Mowgli. And then also the resident
Yes, give her a mention.
top fighter on for the Knockout podcast is Loma Lookboonmee.
Yes.
And she's always brilliant. Like one of I think the first Thai fighter in the UFC. I think that's true.
I think so.
But she's just fantastic. Brilliant in the clinch. Just really a treat to watch in that regard. And yeah, even though she is tiny, which is why I think that she will struggle kind of at strawweight, because I think she is naturally an atom weight. And you saw that against Angela Hill, kind of on the feet and certainly in the clinch. She's a good deal ahead of most people in the division. And she's really just fighting a big size disadvantage.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, as you say, she's very much a fan favorite here at Knockout Podcast. So we'll see if she can get the job done. But other than that, there's not really too much else to mention. So unless you have any parting thoughts, Jack?
No, nothing in particular, I don't think.
Well, that will draw proceedings to a close for this episode. We'll be back sometime early in the week to talk about all the fallout from Reyes, Procházka, and a look towards a good Sandhagen Dillashaw card at the weekend, which has got Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Gregor Gillespie, Neil Magny versus Jeff Neal, Angela Hill, Amanda Hebas, and Diego Sanchez, Donald Cerrone, which maybe not so much that last one, but certainly some of the other ones I mentioned.
Well, that's interesting. It's a bit of a rivalry, old teammate fight. So from that regard, it's kind of, and I think no, Cerrone fought the Pettis fight, didn't he? Oh, and he fought the Nico Price fight. I forgot about that. Yeah, whatever. Oh, I didn't know the Nico Price fight got overturned to a no contest. That's interesting.
I did it.
Yeah, Price tested positive for marijuana.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay, whatever. But no, I was thinking that we hadn't seen Donald Cerrone for some reason in a while, but no, he's actually been still fairly active. So what do I know? But yeah, I think it'll be interesting enough. Donald Cerrone's fun. So
Yeah, and there's a few other fun fights in there, but we'll save.
Oh yeah, the rest of the card's fantastic.
Yeah, we'll save much of that discussion for next week. But till then, stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you then.
See ya.